The phone call came at 3:47 a.m., jolting me awake with that particular brand of terror that only a mother knows. My daughter Emma's name flashed on the screen, and my heart immediately constricted. "Mom?" Her voice was small, trembling, nothing like the confident 15-year-old who'd left for her summer trip just 2 weeks ago. "Mom, I'm at the airport. Grandpa, he left me here." I sat bolt upright, my husband Michael stirring beside me. "What? Emma, what do you mean he left you?" "We had a fight." I could hear her struggling not to cry. I told him I wanted to come home early because I was homesick, and he got really angry. He said I was ungrateful and spoiled, that I needed to learn to be tougher. We were supposed to fly back together next week, but he drove me to the airport tonight and just left me here. He said you'd figure it out, that this would teach me a lesson about appreciating what I have. My blood ran cold. "Where are you exactly? Are you safe?" According to YouTube analytics, 99% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. "I'm inside the terminal. There's security here, but Mom, I don't have a ticket. I don't know what to do." Michael was already reaching for his laptop. Pulling up Flight, I kept my voice steady for Emma, though rage was building inside me like a tsunami. "Baby, stay right where you are. Stay near security. We're going to get you home. Don't move, okay?" After 20 frantic minutes of booking the earliest flight and arranging for airport assistance, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what my father had done. He had abandoned my child, his granddaughter, at an airport 4 states away in the middle of the night because she dared to express vulnerability. Michael looked at me with barely contained fury. "Catherine, he left a 15-year-old girl alone at an airport at 3 in the morning. What kind of person does that?" I thought I knew my father. Stanley Morrison had always been stern, old-fashioned in his views about strength and resilience. He'd raised me with an iron hand, always pushing, always demanding more. "Weakness is a choice," he'd say. "The world doesn't care about your feelings." I'd spent my childhood trying to earn his approval, always falling short, always too soft, too emotional, too much like my mother. When Emma was born, I'd hoped he might soften. For a while, it seemed he had. He doted on her in his way, though his parenting philosophy never truly changed. "Don't baby her," he'd tell me constantly. "You'll make her weak." This summer visit was supposed to be a bonding experience. Emma had wanted to go, excited to spend time at his lake house, to go fishing and hiking like they'd done when she was younger. I'd hesitated, remembering my own difficult childhood, but Emma had insisted. "He's different with me, Mom," she'd said. "He's actually pretty cool." I'd wanted to believe her. I'd wanted to believe he'd changed. Now, as I threw clothes into a bag and arranged for my mother-in-law to watch our younger son, I felt the scales falling from my eyes. My father hadn't changed at all. He'd simply hidden his true nature better, waiting for the moment when Emma would show what he considered weakness, so he could correct it. The flight to Denver was the longest 3 hours of my life. Michael held my hand as I stared out the window, my phone clutched in my other hand, with Emma's reassuring text messages coming every few minutes. Airport staff had found her, given her water and a blanket, let her wait in a family area. She was safe, but she was traumatized, and that was unforgivable. When I finally saw her in the airport, small and exhausted in a chair near the United desk, something inside me broke and reformed harder. She ran to me, and I held her while she sobbed, this brave, beautiful girl who'd been punished for the crime of missing her mother. "I'm sorry," she kept saying. "I shouldn't have said I wanted to come home." "Don't you dare apologize," I whispered fiercely. "You did nothing wrong. Nothing." On the flight home, Emma finally told me everything. How my father had grown increasingly critical as the visit wore on. How he'd made fun of her for being glued to her phone when she texted her friends. How he'd called her lazy when she didn't want to wake up at dawn for fishing. How he'd mocked her for being a vegetarian. "Your generation is so soft," he'd told her repeatedly. "You need to toughen up." The final straw had come when Emma, homesick and tired of the constant criticism, had quietly asked if she could go home early. My father had exploded, telling her she was ungrateful, that she didn't appreciate the opportunity he was giving her, that she was exactly like me, weak and disappointing. He'd thrown her belongings in his truck, driven her to the airport in angry silence, and walked away without looking back. "He said you'd learn a lesson too, Mom," Emma said quietly. "He said you'd failed as a parent by coddling me, and now you'd have to deal with the consequence." Michael's jaw clenched so hard I thought his teeth might crack. That man has a reckoning coming. I didn't call my father that day, or the next. I was too angry. And more importantly, I was focused on Emma. She was shaken, her confidence damaged by someone who should have protected her. We spent those first days just being together, reassuring her, letting her talk about it when she wanted to, reminding her that asking for help was strength, not weakness. But my father called me on the third day. His voice was casual, unconcerned. "Catherine, I assume Emma made it home." The audacity stole my breath. "You left my daughter alone at an airport at 3 in the morning. I left her in a safe public place. Don't be so dramatic. She had her phone. She's 15 years old. And she needs to learn that the world doesn't revolve around her feelings. She committed to spending the summer here, then wanted to leave the moment things weren't perfectly comfortable. That's not how life works. I did what needed to be done. You abandoned a child, your grandchild." "I taught her a lesson," he said, his tone hardening. "Something you clearly haven't been doing. You're raising her to be soft, just like you were soft. She needs to understand that she can't just quit when things get difficult. And you need to understand that your permissive parenting has consequences. You could have called me, you could have talked to me about bringing her home early. Instead, you dumped her at an airport in the middle of the night and drove away. What if something had happened to her?" "Nothing happened to her. She's fine. You're overreacting as usual. Everything is always a crisis with you, Catherine." That was his pattern, I realized. Minimize, deflect, make me feel like I was the problem for having feelings about his behavior. It was the same dance we'd done my entire life. "Don't contact us again," I said quietly. "You're not welcome in our lives." There was a pause. "You don't mean that?" "I absolutely mean that. What you did was unforgivable. You endangered my child to make a point. We're done." "Catherine, you're being hysterical." "When you calm down," I hung up. My hands were shaking, but I felt clarity I'd never experienced before. My whole life, I'd been trying to win his approval, letting him make me feel small and insufficient. But I was a mother now, and my father had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Michael found me sitting on the edge of our bed, staring at the phone. "You okay?" "I should have done this years ago," I said. "Cut him off. I kept hoping he'd change, that he'd see me, really see me. But he never will. And I will not let him damage my daughter the way he damaged me." "You're not damaged, Kate. You're strong as hell. You just had to learn that his opinion of you doesn't define reality." Over the following weeks, my father tried to reach out several times. He sent emails, left voicemails, had my aunt call to tell me I was being unreasonable. Each message followed the same script. I was overreacting. Emma was fine. I needed to be more rational. He was the victim of my emotional instability. I blocked his number. I blocked him on social media. I sent a certified letter stating clearly that he was to have no contact with any member of our family. Michael supported me completely, and Emma, seeing me set boundaries for the first time in my life, started to heal. But something interesting began to happen in my father's world, a natural cascade of consequences that I only heard about secondhand. My aunt called 2 months after the incident, not to berate me this time, but to talk. "Catherine, I need you to know something. When your father told me his version of what happened, I believed him. But then I talked to Emma's friend's mother, who'd heard the real story from Emma. When I confronted your father about lying to me, he was completely unrepentant. I needed you to know that I see things clearly now. And I'm sorry I initially took his side. She wasn't the only one." My father, in his arrogance, had told his version of events widely, painting himself as the tough-love grandfather, teaching necessary lessons to his spoiled granddaughter and her oversensitive mother. But Emma, through her friends and their parents, had told the truth. The story spread through my father's social circles, and people started seeing him differently. His poker group quietly stopped inviting him. My aunt heard it from one of the wives. "We all have grandchildren." The thought of leaving a 15-year-old girl alone at an airport in the middle of the night, then bragging about it, that's not tough love. That's cruelty. His volunteering position at the local youth center was discontinued. The director, a woman with 2 teenage daughters, told him they were going in a different direction. My aunt heard through the grapevine that several parents had expressed concerns about his judgment and approach to young people. The lake house, his pride and joy, sat empty that fall. Usually, friends and family filled it every weekend, but invitations he extended were politely declined. People were busy, they said. Perhaps next year. Still, I didn't seek updates about him. I was focused on my own family, on rebuilding Emma's confidence, on being present for my children in ways my father had never been present for me. Emma joined a therapy group for teens, where she learned that her feelings were valid, that expressing needs wasn't weakness. She grew stronger, but with a softness intact, the ability to be both resilient and emotionally open, to be tough without being cruel. I worked on my own healing too. Therapy helped me understand how deeply my father's parenting had affected me, how I'd internalized his voice, always pushing down my own feelings, always second-guessing my gentleness with my children. Learning to silence that voice was hard work, but it was necessary. Then, 8 months after the airport incident, my aunt called with news that made my hands go cold. "Catherine, your father had a stroke. He's at Presbyterian Hospital. It's serious." My first instinct was guilt, that old programmed response. I should go to him. He's my father. But Michael, reading my face, shook his head. "You don't owe him anything, Kate. Not after what he did. And definitely not while Emma's still healing." I thought about it carefully. This wasn't about revenge or punishment. This was about protecting my family and my own peace. "I need to know he's getting medical care," I told my aunt, "but I'm not coming. I wish him recovery, but I can't have him in my life." "I understand," she said quietly. "For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. He's been asking for you, but it's not with any humility. He's angry that you're not here. He says you're being petty and vindictive." Even facing his own mortality, my father couldn't admit fault. That told me everything I needed to know. The stroke left my father partially paralyzed on his left side. He needed extensive care, rehabilitation, help with basic daily tasks. And this is where karma's lesson became impossible to ignore. My aunt, who I'd expected to step in, set firm boundaries. "I'll help arrange care, but I'm not giving up my life to care for someone who's never shown appreciation and refuses to acknowledge his own role in driving away everyone who loved him." His poker buddies visited once or twice in the hospital, uncomfortable and unsure. They didn't return. The lake house had to be sold to pay for his care facility. His independence, the thing he'd valued above all else, the quality he'd tried to beat into me, and then Emma, was gone. But the real reckoning came from an unexpected source: his caregivers. 6 months into his rehabilitation, I got a call from the care facility director. "Mrs. Henderson, I'm calling as a courtesy. Your father has listed you as his emergency contact. Though we understand you're estranged, I want you to know that we've had to reassign his care team twice due to his abusive behavior towards staff. He's been written up multiple times for verbal abuse, for refusing to cooperate with therapy, for treating our nurses with profound disrespect." "I'm sorry he's doing that," I said, "but I'm not sure why you're calling me." "Because he blames you for his situation. He tells anyone who'll listen that his ungrateful daughter abandoned him in his time of need, that you're vindictive and cruel. Several staff members have asked to see the actual history because his version doesn't match the limited records we have. I'm calling to get your side of the story because it affects how we approach his care and his unrealistic expectations that you'll swoop in and take him home." I told her everything: the airport, the pattern of emotional abuse, the refusal to apologize, the continued blame and minimization. I sent her copies of the certified letter, the blocked communication attempts, everything documented. "Thank you for your honesty," she said. "This explains a great deal. We see this sometimes. People who've pushed everyone away, then can't understand why they're alone. I'm sorry you went through this, and I want you to know that we won't pressure you or give out your information. Your boundaries will be respected." A year after the stroke, my father was moved to a long-term care facility. He'd made minimal progress in rehabilitation, largely because he refused to do the work. "I shouldn't have to do this," he told therapists, my aunt reported. "I shouldn't be in this situation." But he was in that situation, and it was largely a consequence of his own choices, not the stroke itself. That was biology, chance, the randomness of human frailty, but the loneliness, the isolation, the absence of family support. That was the natural result of a lifetime of cruelty disguised as strength, of pushing people away while demanding their loyalty. I thought about visiting him once, not to reconcile, but to see if I felt any need for closure. Michael and I drove to the facility, but I couldn't make myself go inside. I sat in the parking lot, looking at the building, and realized I didn't need to see him. I'd already found my closure in choosing my daughter, my family, my own peace. He taught me something after all, I told Michael. He taught me exactly what kind of parent and person not to be. We drove home, and I felt lighter than I had in years. Emma, now 16, was thriving. She'd made the honor roll, joined the school theater program, developed deep friendships. She was kind but not a pushover, gentle but not weak. She knew how to ask for help, how to express her needs, how to walk away from people who treated her badly. She was everything my father had feared she'd become, soft, and she was magnificent. One night, as I tucked her in despite her protests that she was too old for it, she said, "Mom, do you ever regret cutting off Grandpa?" I thought about it honestly. No, I regret not doing it sooner. I regret all the years I let his voice in my head tell me I wasn't good enough. But cutting him off? That was one of the best decisions I've ever made. Do you think what happened to him was karma? I think what happened to him was life. The stroke was medical, random. But being alone, having no one, that was consequence. He spent his whole life pushing people away, treating them badly, refusing to acknowledge when he hurt them. Eventually, there was no one left to push away. That's not karma. That's just cause and effect. I still get angry sometimes, Emma admitted, about that night, about him leaving me there. That's okay. You're allowed to be angry. He hurt you. But I'm proud of you for not letting it make you hard and closed off. You're still brave enough to be vulnerable, to ask for help, to love people. That takes more strength than his kind of toughness ever did. 2 years after the airport incident, I got a final call from the care facility. My father had passed away. A second stroke, they said, swift and massive. He'd been alone when it happened, in the early morning, the same time he'd abandoned Emma at that airport. I felt sad, but it was an abstract sadness, the way you'd feel hearing about any human death. The complicated grief of losing a difficult parent never materialized because I'd already grieved him long ago, grieved the father I'd wished for, but never had. The funeral was small. My aunt attended, a few old acquaintances. I went, not for him, but for myself, to mark the end of a chapter. Emma chose not to come, and I supported her decision. I forgive him because carrying anger hurts me, not him, she said. But I don't need to say goodbye. He said goodbye to me at that airport. Standing at the grave, I felt Michael's hand in mine and thought about legacy. My father had wanted to teach lessons about strength, about toughness, about not being weak. Instead, he taught me that real strength is in vulnerability, that toughness without compassion is just cruelty, and that the greatest weakness is being unable to apologize. He'd tried to teach Emma that same harsh lesson, but it had backfired spectacularly. Instead of making her harder, his cruelty had made her wiser. She'd learned to recognize toxic behavior early, to set boundaries, to value people who treated her with kindness. She'd learned that she deserved better, and that knowledge would protect her for the rest of her life. As we left the cemetery, my aunt walked with me to the car. "I found something while going through his things," she said, handing me a letter. "It's addressed to you. I don't know if you want to read it." I took it, uncertain. That night, after Emma was asleep, I opened it. His handwriting, shaky from the stroke, was barely legible. "Catherine, you were always too sensitive. I tried to make you stronger, but you resisted at every turn. Now you've poisoned Emma against me with your weakness. When you realize what you've done, it will be too late. You'll see that I was right, that my methods work. But I won't be here to say I told you so. That's your punishment, knowing you were wrong." I read it twice, then handed it to Michael. He read it and shook his head. Even at the end, I agreed. I took the letter to the fireplace and watched it burn. There was no deathbed revelation, no last-minute growth, no redemption arc. My father had died as he'd lived, convinced of his righteousness, unable to see his own role in his isolation, blaming everyone else for his loneliness. But I had changed. I'd broken the cycle, and that was everything. 3 years after that phone call from the airport, I sat in the audience of Emma's high school theater production. She played the lead, commanding the stage with confidence and vulnerability perfectly balanced. Afterward, surrounded by friends and their supportive parents, she glowed. "You were amazing," I told her, hugging her tight. "I almost had a panic attack backstage," she admitted. "But I remembered what you always say. That feeling scared doesn't mean you can't do it. Being nervous just means you care." I smiled, blinking back tears. This was the lesson that mattered, not toughing it out, not suppressing feelings, but acknowledging fear and doing hard things anyway, while being gentle with yourself in the process. That night, after the celebration, Emma said something that felt like both an ending and a beginning. "Mom, I forgive Grandpa. I really do. Not because what he did was okay, but because I understand now that hurt people hurt people. He probably learned that harshness from his own parents. And it stops with us. We don't pass it on." "No," I agreed, pulling her close. "We don't pass it on." My father had wanted to teach a lesson that night at the airport. He'd wanted Emma to learn to be tough, to stop being weak, to understand that feelings don't matter. Instead, she learned something far more valuable: that cruelty is unacceptable regardless of the justification, that walking away from toxic people is an act of strength, and that the people who truly love you will never punish you for being human. And me? I'd learned that some battles are won, not by fighting back, but by refusing to engage, by building a better life while the person who hurt you drowns in the consequences of their own cruelty. Karma isn't revenge. It's the universe's way of showing that how we treat people matters, that our choices ripple outward, that we all eventually live in the world we create through our actions. My father had created a world of isolation and died alone in it. I'd created a world of love and compassion and got to live in it every day. In the end, life had taught him the hardest lesson of all: that real strength lies not in being hard enough to weather anything alone, but in being soft enough that people want to stand beside you when storms come. And that lesson, unlike his, was worth learning.